Welcome back to the LBP speedrunning guide. Today we're looking at the darkness. Right at the beginning there are two different routes that are possible. We'll explain the normal and safer one first, then afterwards we'll have a look at the quicker but much harder alternative. To start the normal route, hold right as you spawn, and then once you land at the bottom, drop down a layer and do a dialogue jump. This is pretty much the slowest auto-scroller in the run, but we're going to be speeding it up a bit by carrying the dog. Line up a jump so you land right in front of the dog and hold neutral on the control stick before hitting it, otherwise you'll change the layer. Then the dog should climb straight up onto your head. Sometimes the dog will only go halfway up your body. It's a bit difficult, but you can save it by grabbing the dog and jumping, to try and move it further on top of you. Though it's probably better just to get out from underneath it and try again. Once the dog's on your head, you can freely run to the right with it. Upon reaching the spikes, move forward a layer and hop onto the dog's back. Keep riding it across the second spike pit, and once the front wheel reaches around the top of the ramp, hop off and pull the bridge down as fast as you can. Then run back so the dog will go backwards, then start moving it forward again once it can start going up the ramp. You can try and carry the dog a little more here, but it doesn't matter too much because of the cycles later on. From here we can leave the dog and go ahead early. In the dark you can see where the platforms are in relation to the bubbles. Pressing L1 to see where you are helps as well. But if you haven't learnt the positions yet, just wait for the dog and use the light to see what you're doing. Wait for the dog in front of the gas, and as it starts coming out, get the dog on top of your head again by doing the same strat as before. Run all the way to the right until you reach the elevator platform, stop carrying the dog, and jump off to reach the lever. Once the dog is up, carry it to the right one last time over to where the collector takes it. Make sure to drop it and hop off the trapdoor before it opens. To skip the skull elevators, as the collector comes down, grab onto the light that's at the bottom of a ship, fly up with him and let go to land on this skull. From here you can do a risky jump straight to the next platform, or wait for the skull elevators to start moving to take you up. Dying or falling down after the collector flies away has a small chance of actually soft locking the level. We're not entirely sure why this happens, but just be cautious. Reaching the next checkpoint is where the two paths meet back up again, so now we'll go back and explain the other route, which completely skips the dog. It's a good idea to have a costume piece that glows, since you'll be spending a lot of time in the dark. Back at the start, if we tried just walking past the dog, we'd get stuck at this spike pit, but here's a way we can actually get around all of it. Either before the level loads or as you're coming out of the entrance, spawn a second player for a solo co-op jump. If you take too long to spawn them, the entrance will go off screen and they won't appear. As the new player, stand on this side of the ladder in the back layer. This person will be the grabber. Switch back to the jumper, run into the wall, then jump while holding neutral. This will push you away from the wall and it'll set up the grabber to pull you in the right way. Switch to the grabber, and then pull the other player to their side, then switch back to the jumper. As you're getting the co-op jump, hold left to go in between the wall and the ladder. If you now start spamming X, you should start to climb up the wall. Once you reach the top, do a jump off the top of the ladder and you'll be out of bounds. You'll now be running to the right for a little bit. You can't really do much except for some slope jumps once you start running, since the rest is mostly flat. Eventually you'll run into a hill. Make sure that you're in the middle layer for this part. The risky but fastest strat to get back in bounds here is to drop down a layer after about 1.5 seconds of running up the hill. This will have you land onto one of the platforms that's in front of the gas. The safer alternative is to run to the flat part after the hill, then backtrack to the very top of the slope. If you drop down at this part and hold right very slightly, you'll land on the exact same platform. Once back in bounds, run to the right until you reach the elevator. Do a bounce jump off the left of the platform that usually rises to make it to the lever. Now for the hardest part, which is making it up to the elevators without using the collector. Jump off the lever to make it to these two score bubbles, then set up an RCJ to do a lever fling. This lever fling is the hardest in the game because of how much height you need to get. It's mostly down to luck, but there are a few things you can do to make it easier. You should approach it with mostly downwards momentum, but also moving to the right slightly. Try to grab it from a distance that would use the full length of your arms to reach. Then while still holding right, grab the lever for only a few frames. If you've done it right, you'll have gotten enough height to fly all the way up to the dissolve that's holding the collector, where you can then grab and swing across to land on the skull platforms. Off the left of the skull, you can do a tricky RCJ type of thing to make it back on top of the dissolve. It's a lot harder than an actual RCJ since you're on a left corner, but if you miss it, you can always grab the dissolve to try again without falling. Once you're up, move to the right and do a jump off the top of the skull to reach the next checkpoint. It's actually possible to go so high that you make it on top of the dissolve avoiding the left corner jump. It's pretty unlikely for this to happen though. The two routes now meet back up again. So once you've made it to the checkpoint after the elevators, we're going to be using intended straps for a while. Avoid any obstacles through the entire next section. It can be easy to misjudge the timing of the bats, so take your time if you need to. There's also a small ledge jump where the first rising spikes are, that sometimes lets you catch a cycle. Swing across the next two skulls, head down and pull out the sponge and jump across as intended. There's a jump that clears this gap without the sponge, but it's immensely difficult. For the next spike obstacles, you want to avoid them by changing into the back layer and fire boosting off this candle. Since fire kills you on 2 hits in this game, you can safely jump across it, which just avoids waiting for the spike platform if it happens to be in a bad position. The cycles that are most important now are these elevators right at the end of the level, which lose you about 4 seconds for each one missed, so our movement is going to be focused on catching the fastest elevator that we can. Do a small edge jump to try and get past on Lou, while also skipping the dialogue box at the same time. Here you can swing across the 3 skulls as normal, or you can try going for this fling, where you pull the first skull left and use the roof to fly across the pit, potentially saving an elevator cycle. It's pretty easy to tell if you're going to get it before you have to let go, so the risk isn't too high, but the small time loss in going for it could lose you a cycle later. Pull the lever on the other side and death abuse to get back to Don Lu. Pull him over to the spike pit, then let go, and grab him again once he's settled. This just lets you pull him from a spot on his body that'll help with the floor later. Continue pulling him across as soon as the bridge reaches you, then place him on top of the sprint platform so he's leaning into the wall. Climb up the stairs, press the button and pull him over to the door. Once the door opens you can let go of him since he doesn't open anything else. Run to the right and hop on the next elevator that you can. Make it to the top of the elevators and start running to the right. You can trigger the second skulldozer early here by jumping as you go past the butler. This just helps you get onto the second bridge faster. But if you don't activate it early, you can actually use the second skulldozer to get a fling over to the scoreboard as it emerges from the wall. You can die from it pretty easily though, so we just recommend doing the first option. Whichever way you did it, make your way to the scoreboard and return to the pod early. And that's the darkness. We'll see you next time where we'll discuss the most boring level in the run, Skulldozer. See you later.